the 100th anniversary of that 1924 act was celebrated all around this country last year. But somehow these so-called top lawyers don't know anything. They apparently they don't know how to shepherdize, right, Diane? I mean, they don't know anything.
Right.
They have been standing in court asserting that Native Americans aren't citizens. Can you guys imagine that there are people walking around in our country calling themselves the top of their profession and they don't know the basic rights? They think somehow that their white skin has given them an extra privilege over everybody else in this country. It is absolutely disgusting. And the fact that, therefore, Daryl, I was not shocked when they started arresting Native Americans, because all this so-called mass deportation is about. It's about hatred. It's about building up fear of other people. It's about dividing the races. And sadly, it's about massive racial profiling.
Race.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Barbara. You know, just an excellent point that you were bringing about what all is going on in that regard. And you know, Barbara, you still there?
Yes, of course I am.
Okay. No, excellent point that you were bringing up in that regard. And you know, and one of the things that we were talking about, you know, with the mass deportations is what was happening in the schools and in the school system. And we're really fortunate to have with us someone who's in the school system in one of the target areas of Chicago, Illinois, in the person of Edward Ward. So, Edward, could you share with us what's happening in Chicago? I mean, we're reading all this stuff, and it's like, this can't be happening. This can't be America where this is happening. Edward, what's happening?
Well, yeah, it's you reckon that. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. But secondly, I would say the you can feel in the air the thickness of you know the weight of the deportation issue. We have quite a few newcomers here in our school. And what's happened in the past weeks is that once Trump had taken off, or the past week or whatever is once Trump took office, immediately we saw a huge decline. About 90% of the newcomers stopped coming to school. And we've been briefed by the administration here. We've also been briefed by other folks within CPS to, prepare in case ICE comes to the schools. And so we've been challenged with not complying with ICE. If they happen to come to the schools and attempt to snatch kids up from the schools, then we've been charged to treat it as if it is a lockdown, having intruders come to the schools. And I'll tell you, just the other day, yesterday, in fact, I had students and parents come up to us, and the parents are terrified and crying and in tears because they're afraid that if they leave their kids in school, they're going to be snatched up and they're not going to have any idea where their kids are. The same way the kids are scared to come to school because they're afraid that when they leave school, their parents may not be there anymore. And so this is the weight of what we've been dealing with. And I got to tell you, in dealing with it, we've had to come across with the reality that, listen, if these federal soldiers, come into these schools and attempt to take kids from their parents, we have to make a moral decision. And for me, I've made the decision that, listen, you will not come into the school, you won't come into a school that I work in and attempt to take kids without their parents' notice or without legal authorization from the parents. And so for me, I believe in standing firm no matter what the fight is, because I truly believe that legality and morality are the fraternal twins of social order. They look right or they look alike in some aspects, but legality is not moral, and we can't justify what's been happening in these schools. And I think it's interesting, finally, to say that in recent days, our mayor has actually been summoned to go to Washington, D.C. By Congress to answer for making Chicago a sanctuary city. And so there's a new legal matters that are going to come from all this.
Wow. And you know, Mr. Bacot, I listen to all the confusion that is being created by this administration from these acts and dealing with these steps on mass deportation. And let me just take a step back for a second, because it seems like confusion is the rule of the day with this administration. You know, when I think about it, you know, one of the things that we just recently saw the administration do was to pardon all these people from January 6th, from the January 6th insurrection, right? These are people that were really, all over the Capitol and threatening police officers, and one officer, subsequently passes away. We have people that are injured. We have one of the people that are a part of this raid that passes away, and it's just incredible that we now see a president of the United States that's pardoning all these people that were part of this insurrection. I mean, coming out of a law enforcement background, what impact does the pardoning of these folks have on law enforcement? And can you somehow gel that with what we see happening now with the law enforcement from ICE?
Yes, thank you for the question. And you have to, I'm going to say this like this. You have a twice impeached, criminally convicted felon in chief who has allowed his minions, which are the J6 individuals who he's pardoned. Now, all of these individuals had some type of violation, most of it violent, which I, as you mentioned, have a violent crime background, investigated all of these groups, whether it be the Aryan Nation, whether it be the Ku Klux Klan. I've seen how they operate, know how they operate. Most of these individuals are part of either the Proud Boys or the Army of God, the Oath Keepers or the Army of God. And most of these individuals have violent tendencies. As we just found out, of course, one of them was pardoned, and a day later he's back in prison. And then Sunday we just had one who was in a traffic stop. And in that traffic stop, he ended up, his life happened to be, dismissed because he was challenging the law enforcement officers. So you actually have a two-edged sword, and you got to call a thing a thing. In one breath, you're saying you're for law enforcement. Then on the second breath, you're allowing your militia group to go out and create havoc and to harm law enforcement. So the ICE agent, I'll bring this in, as you just mentioned, the ICE agent is up under a particular guidance. Most of the gentlemen who are working, they're not, overall law enforcement is not overall violent. However, when you're given a set of orders to do a certain set of things, most people in law enforcement are going to follow that order by their management. And so therefore, that's where the trickery comes in, because it's systemic to America. So let me just go all the way back to, go back to the enslavement of individuals. People that came here, we weren't supposed to be here, but we're here. In the Constitution, there is guidance policy regarding militias, and that militia is for white men. When they say all men should be armed or have a militia, they're talking white men because, of course, the people they brought here were not considered even citizens or even human beings. So this militia thing is now cropped back up even bigger. And the biggest one that started off was the McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh, same type of mindset, same type of rhetoric. But what we have to do, and I think the brother who's in the school system, you do have to stand up when they come in, and you can challenge. And I would try then to bring in the media. Hey, they're here. Because what we're also facing is a media that has minimized this impact by messaging. They'd rather message knuckleheads, policies and guidance as opposed to dealing with human morality. I hope that answers the question.
And Daryl, I love Mr. Bacot making this point about the hypocrisy. I mean, remember, folks, I think there's something people are losing in all this celebration of, quote, he's rounding up the criminals. Folks, he says that he intends to deport 12 million people. There are no 12 million, undocumented people who have committed any kind of crime in this country. In fact, of all the people in the United States, on this land who have committed a crime, people who are, quote, undocumented are not even 1 good old percent. So what people are missing is that he's playing the race card. He's playing the fear card. because what they're going to do is they're going to try to get you, all of you sitting at home, to feel comfortable that they're, quote, protecting you. And then when they come for the people who have never, ever done anything wrong but tried to work in this country or tried to live here, and trying to, find a path towards naturalization, what they're going to do is that they're going to start attacking them, hoping that you haven't paid attention, that you think that all people should be gone. Plus, one thing Mr. Bacot didn't talk about, Mr. Bacot, let's talk about them, right? Those, quote, insurrectionists that were there on January 6th. My recollection is that they were using a whole lot of racial slurs, weren't they? Parading around with the Confederate flag, and that I recall that they, from hearing the black officers of the U.S. Capitol Police talking about all the racial slurs that were hurled at them.
Absolutely, Barbara. And what we have to do as we move forward is, again, I think I mentioned it already, we have to call a thing. Because you're right. When you're carrying around this particular type of flag, which is, obviously, that's maybe your Southern heritage or the people who lost the war. But now we have to remember, though, because of this act, because of who they've put in office now, they have kind of won the war. They've won the Civil War. This all goes back to the winning, who won the Civil War. It goes back to all the statues that now the, quote unquote, the Americans said, hey, we don't want those statues anymore, but you still had a group fighting. These folks have been fighting for 148 years now to get to this point right here. These are the descendants of the descendants of the descendants. It's only 3 generations, and you can do it by 50s, right? 50, 50, 50, you get 150 years. So these people still have that same venom, have that same animus, have that same hate. And then on top of that, when you bring in your billionaire white supremacist who can throw up the Hell Hitler sign, okay, and then you try and tell me I didn't see what I saw. Oh, no, I saw what I saw. Don't tell me I didn't see what I saw. And when you have people, including our media, bandits, I call them media bandits because you're now not reporting what I remember as a child when I had news reporting. We no longer have a Tom Brokaw. We no longer have a Walter Cronkite where they're just telling the news. Now we have all of this dramatized news, which then affects how people are seeing the picture. And if you're only putting out a certain mindset of information, which in the intelligence community, we would call that disinformation, or you're putting out propaganda that defeats the moral standards of what you call yourself as being a civilized society.
All right.
Really interesting. And Bryson, I want to come to you for the college perspective on what's happening down in Alabama. But before I do that, Dianne, one of the things that Mr. Bacot just raised just really, caught my interest when he was talking about, we always hear and we're always taught this history lesson, and he used the term, and correct me if I'm wrong, he used the term talking about the heritage of the flag or, of the Confederate flag and blah, 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 that they always talk about. Well, the thing about that is, we say that the Confederacy lost the war and they're still flying the flag. But what President Trump has now done by pardoning these January 6 folks, isn't that the same philosophy about the South will rise again? Isn't that the same philosophy? We lost the war, but he's now freeing us that were involved in going into the Capitol and the insurrection that was there. Isn't that tapping into that same we will rise again mentality? And that's how things are beginning to resolve. Is that what you're seeing, Dianne?
Well, I think they've said it. Remember the whole messaging was we want to go back, right? People don't forget that. That was the whole message was about going back, and we kept those of us who could have been asking the question, go back to where? But we always knew what that meant. There wasn't a time and a place, 50, 100, 150 years ago that black folk claim as the good old days, right? They're like, so when was it ever a place where we are rushing to get back to in the 1800s, 1900s? It didn't exist. For us, it didn't. But I think the message couldn't be more clear, Daryl. I think that's the point. That is the point, and that's the Officer Bacot. That's what you